Yo guys, what's up? My name is Dijaji Prime, the ITK, here again with another album review. Today we are talking about Childish Gambino's latest album, Awaken My Love. Now, Childish Gambino is a rapper from Atlanta. He's also an actor and a writer. He has a new series titled Atlanta, which I enjoy quite a bit in case you cared. I will say that this album for long-term Childish Gambino fans is a bit of a departure from the music that he traditionally makes. This album is very funky. I'd say this album falls probably under the category of funk rock, soul and R&B. I'm feeling that Childish Gambino was inspired by a lot of artists from the 70s and 80s, artists like James Brown, Jimi Hendrix, Fela, and also the Funkadelics. I think the Funkadelics have probably the most strong influence on this album, seeing as George Clinton is involved in the creative process on this album. The album cover is also heavily inspired by the Funkadelics' Maggot Brain album, I think, which came out in 1971 or 1970, and this apparently is Childish Gambino's favorite album as well as his father's favorite album. This album is very central. It touches on topics of love and sex. It also touches in a very subtle and not too in-your-face way on social political issues, obviously around the African American community and the American community, I would say, as a whole. So it's 11 tracks long. I think it runs for about 49 minutes. It opens with the track Me and Your Mama. I think this track has very detailed production and is quite varied. It starts off very gentle, smooth, immersive, and then it changes up in the middle, gets very rocky. There's very passionate singing from Childish Gambino. I didn't know he could sing in this way. The singing from Childish Gambino throughout this album is very charismatic. It's very chesty, I could say, and he sings with a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and you really do get this feeling that Childish Gambino is giving his all when he's singing on this album. So Me and Your Mama, basically, I'd say this is a love track. I will say this album feels to me like it's sort of dedicated to Childish Gambino's son, who was born earlier this year. It feels like it's sort of maybe giving his son some tips on life or some characters and values he should have in his life. I will also say I don't know if I mentioned that this album has a lot of rock on it, or I should say is heavily inspired by 70s era rock. Again, I feel like there's an inspiration of Jimi Hendrix on this album. The next track, Have Some Love. This feels like a hippie type of song, not like any disrespect, but it feels like, let's all love each other, let's all come together, have love and, respect for one another. I love the positive messaging on this. This album feels very communal. You get this lovely sense of togetherness on this album. It also feels very rustic, feels very little bit country, and it feels very raw. It has this very raw and authentic feeling. Sometimes maybe something that people would say is dusty. I just think it's very raw and authentic. This track, I would say, has a bit of country and funky production on it. The next track, Boogeyman, I would say that this track is probably heavily inspired by Hit It and Quit It by the Funkadelics. The feeling I get on this track is like there's a reference to maybe police brutality, maybe the perception of blacks, not just maybe in America, but around the world, the perception that blacks are violent and are criminals. Basically saying, we need to be saved from this boogeyman. And I think that's a jab at, societal perceptions of people of African descent. There's an interesting line on here. He says, every boy and girl all around the world knows my nigger's words, but if he's scared of me, how can we be free? I don't know if this maybe is talking about rappers, how everybody can know the lyrics to a rapper's song, but is still scared of the rapper. Sonically, this is probably one of the best tracks on here. It's very varied, very funky. It's very immersive. I'd say this album is something that you could just roll one to and really just immerse yourself in the vibe of it. It's not an album, I would say. It's an album that's also very dependent on your environment. I was walking around a bit with this album. I was sitting at home and sitting in just a chill environment as well. When you're walking around, you don't get that ability, you don't have that ability to absorb this album as well as you would maybe when you're at home chilling. So I will say that if you want to enjoy this album, just be in a very chill, calm, environment, a very calm atmosphere, a very happy and, loving atmosphere. And also don't be scared to roll one and just sink into the vibe. The next track, Zombies. This track as well, I don't know, this track could have been inspired by Fela Kuti's Zombie. And this track also talks about people who exploit others. I'm guessing corporations who just use people for the monetary gains they can gain off of them and not because they particularly care. So basically just saying, profit off of them and gain whatever you want. Also maybe a lover who just, wants to gain something from you and doesn't really care about you, hence being a zombie. The next track, Riot. This is a more uplifting track, a bit shorter, one of the shorter tracks on this, and you feel the heavy influence of James Brown, definitely in Childish Gambino's singing on this. The next track, Redbone. This was another single, like I said, for this album. This is my favorite track on this album. His voice is quite high-pitched on this track. It's a very enjoyable track. It has some nice boom bap production, also very funky, and it's basically more chill, laid-back vibes. And he's basically telling you on this track, or telling the listener or his child to stay woke because people are coming for you. They'll find you when you least expect it, so always be alert. The next track, California, features Childish Gambino singing with some auto-tune. The auto-tune kind of reminds me of something like Tupac's California Love. And I like the auto-tune effect on this. I like the rustic and playful nature of the production on this track. Like I said, this album feels very rustic to me, very rural, very country. And I like the panpipes as well on this track. The next track, Terrified, just features some more very dark and eerie singing and production from this album. And it also is very sensual as well. I would say this album is quite sensual. The next track, Baby Boy. This is probably the most soulful track on this album. I would say on this track, Childish Gambino is basically pleading for you not to take his baby boy, his pride, his prized possession that is his child. Like I said, this whole album just feels like a message or a tip maybe to his child. And on the outro, there's a bit of a spoken word where he says, walk tall, little one. I'm basically telling him to always walk tall and be proud and always keep going no matter what. Basically, words of encouragement, very emotional, very touching. You can feel the emotion listening to this track, and there's a lot of soul and passion on this track, Baby Boy. The next track, The Night Me and Your Mama Met. This track is basically just an instrumental with some very heavenly harmonization. I guess this is a continuation of the track Me and Your Mama, and it sort of maybe gives you an atmosphere or vibe of how magical it was when Childish Gambino met his child's mother, how, there were whatever stars or whatever was going on in the atmosphere. You get that vibe that it was a very magical, very heavenly meeting, and that's just what is communicated with the production on this track. The final track, Stand Tall. Basically, again, I think the name is self-explanatory. Just be strong, stand tall, continue, keep going no matter what. Like I said, this album feels like it's just a dedication to his child. The production on here feels very dreamy. There's a lovely flute on here, and it feels very airy and immersive. It's a very dreamy track. So I will say in summary, this album, in terms of the production, is very funky. You're getting lovely bass lines. You're getting electric and acoustic guitars. Like I said, funk, rock, R&B, and soul. Definitely from the 70s/80s era. So if you are a bit older, you would have an appreciation of that. If you did grow up or grew up listening to that kind of music. It's also a good thing for people younger like myself to listen to this kind of music and just, be drawn into a world of 70s music. Like, this would probably inspire someone to go and listen to music from that era. I did enjoy this album quite a bit. I love the sensual elements. I love the storytelling. I love how it touches on political elements. I love how it's giving, life lessons to his child. It's a very well-rounded album. I'd give this album a 9/10. I will say that if you don't like funk, if you didn't like albums like To Pimp a Butterfly, then you probably won't like this. You probably think it's garbage. But if you are a Childish Gambino fan, I would recommend that you give it a listen. If you don't know what you're getting with this album, I'd say listen to the singles. A lot of the sound is just very similar to what you got from the singles, as well as, if you liked To Pimp a Butterfly, or if you didn't like To Pimp a Butterfly, that would probably be, in terms of the sonics, that would probably determine whether or not you like this album. But if you did like this, I'd say again, if you haven't listened to Pimp a Butterfly, go and listen to that. If you haven't listened to Funkadelic's Maggot Brain or Funkadelics, then I'd recommend those. I'd also recommend some Fela Kuti if you haven't listened to those already. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think of this album. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the sound. I know lots of people won't enjoy the sound. I think this album will probably get a lot of critical acclaim, but won't do as well commercially, but we'll have to wait and see. My name is Dijaji Prime. I hope you have enjoyed this video, this little review. If you did, please be sure to leave a like. If you're new around here, why not click subscribe? I'd greatly appreciate that. And I hope you have a blessed day, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.